you've been on Duolingo for months, maybe longer. You open it every day, you keep the streak going, you work through the lessons, and you still can't read in your target language. You can't follow a conversation without subtitles, you can't get through a single page of something written for native speakers, and at some point you just start wondering whether you're just bad at languages. You're not bad at languages. The tool you're using isn't built to get you there. If you're new here, hi, I'm Nick. I speak 4 languages and I'm currently working on a language learning app of my own. This video is not about my app though, as you can get through your language learning goals without the need for a single app. And Duolingo, for what it's worth, is not a bad app. It's well built, it's accessible, and it does something genuinely useful, which is lowering the barrier to starting. If you've never touched a language before, Duolingo makes it easy to begin. That's real. But there's a difference between an app that's good at getting you started and an app that's built to get you fluent. And Duolingo is very clearly the first one. Most people never figure that out until they've already spent a year on it. The core problem with Duolingo is the following. Duolingo's lesson plan isn't designed around what you need in order to move on. It's designed around keeping you on the app. Those are 2 completely different goals. And once you see that, everything about how Duolingo works starts to make sense. Think about the streak. The streak doesn't measure how much you've learned. It doesn't measure whether you can use the language. It measures how many consecutive days you've opened the app and done something. And what most people do, I've seen this with my friends, I've done it myself, is go back to the easiest possible lesson just to keep the number alive. Not because that lesson teaches them anything new, but because the streak feels like progress, even when it isn't. That's the mechanic working exactly as intended. Duolingo is optimized for retention, for keeping you coming back. And a streak is a very effective retention tool. But retention and acquisition are not the same thing. One measures how often you show up, the other measures whether you actually learn. And even when you do show up and you do work properly, even when you're not gaming it, you run into the second problem, which is the words themselves. Duolingo decides what you learn and the order of that. You don't get to participate in that. You don't get to see the lesson plan, and you definitely don't get to shape it around what you actually need. It teaches you a wide spread of vocabulary, and the logic seems to be that if you learn enough words across enough situations, eventually you'll be able to function. The problem is that most of those words aren't the ones you need first. And a lot of them aren't the ones you need at all. I tested this directly with Ukrainian. I went through Duolingo and accumulated around 400 words. Then I tried to read manga. I already knew well, something I'd read before in another language, so I wasn't going in cold on the story, and I still couldn't follow it with any real comprehension. 400 words, and I couldn't get through a page. Now, Ukrainian uses a different script, which genuinely does make things harder. But the script wasn't the main issue. The main issue was that the 400 words I'd learned weren't the right 400 words. And even the ones that were useful, I hadn't retained properly. Because Duolingo always presents vocabulary in the same context, inside the same app environment and in the same exercise formats. You start to recognize the pattern rather than actually knowing the word. Take the word out of that context and you put it in a real sentence and you're not sure anymore. That's a fundamental problem with how the app teaches. And it's not unique to Ukrainian. I went through the same thing earlier with Portuguese. I stayed on Duolingo past 8,000 words before I felt like I could start reading. I was looking up everything with Google. And even then, I was looking up everything with Google Translate. 1,000 words, I still kept to constant translation and I was still barely functional. Looking back, I was willing to put up with all of that because Portuguese was new and I was motivated enough to push through the unpleasant part. But none of that was necessary. I just didn't know yet what I actually was. Here's the thing that doesn't get said enough. Duolingo doesn't have an exit. There's no point in the app where it says, okay, you're ready, go do this now. Go read this, go watch that. It keeps you inside the experience until the experience runs out. Yes, you can complete the course, but most people don't. I think I know 1 or 2 out of at least 50 people that have tried using it. And even then, most people finish a Duolingo course with no clear idea of what to do next. They have never taught them how to keep going without it. And that's by design. An app that successfully graduates its user isn't optimized for attention. So Duolingo doesn't graduate you. It just eventually runs out of content. And then you're on your own with no framework for what comes next. The person this video is really for is the one who didn't game it. The one who showed up every day, did the actual lesson, took it seriously, and still can't use the language in any meaningful way. That person didn't fail. They just used a tool that wasn't built for the outcome they wanted. Now, here are the things that you actually need. I've spoken about it before, but what you need is 250 words. That's the number. It's 200 high-frequency words, the ones that appear across almost every context in the language, and then 50 words specific to whatever you actually want to do with the language. If you want to read manga, those 50 words come from manga. If you want to watch football, they come from football. Whatever the specific context is, that's where the 50 come from. That's it. 250 chosen deliberately, and you're done with the vocabulary phase. Now, the beginning, getting those 250 words is still work. I want to be clear about that. 250 words isn't something you get effortless, but every single word you're learning is pulling you directly towards something you can actually use. Nothing is filler, nothing is there. And the way those words were selected, they matter. The 200 high frequency words are based on frequency data, words that research shows appear constantly across the language, regardless of topic. You're not guessing at what's useful, you're starting with what's proven to show up everywhere. The 50 specific words are yours. They come from content you already want to consume. So from day one, everything you're learning is directly connected to something you actually care about. This is where it gets different from anything Duolingo offers. And once you have those 250 words, you stop using apps. All of them. You don't graduate to a harder app or a more advanced course, you just stop. Because at that point, you have enough of a foundation to start consuming content you already enjoy, but in your target language. The specific method is dubbed content. Series you've already watched, even when your comprehension isn't perfect yet. You watch them dubbed in whatever language you're learning. And because you already know the story, you're getting enormous amounts of context for every word you hear. You're not just hearing a word in isolation inside an app, you're hearing it in a real scene with real stakes, in a situation that actually makes sense. If you want something real fun, then try playing a video game where you're dependent on understanding it, but it's in a language that you don't know. That's when you learn from your mistakes. I know people who've learned languages this way without ever thinking of it as a method. A classmate of mine moved around a lot growing up, and the way she picked up languages was exactly this. Gather the words you need for your specific situation, then start using the language in real context as soon as possible. Dad did the same thing. He picked up a language on his own, got proficient fast because he found engaging ways to be exposed to it, rather than studying in the traditional sense. Neither of them was sitting in an app doing streak maintenance, and the reason this works is the same reason Duolingo doesn't. You're spending time inside the language rather than inside a product designed around the language. There's a difference. An app is a simulation of language use. Dubbed content, reading, actual conversation, that's language use. And your brain responds to them very differently. After those 250 words, you don't need a structured method anymore. You just need time inside content you actually want to engage with. The language deepens on its own because you are constantly encountering those core words in real context, reinforcing them without it feeling like study. That's also the last time you'll need a language learning app. Mine included, if you decide to go for that one. Once you're at that point, no app is going to help you more than just consuming things you already enjoy in your target language. Yep, the app is the scaffold, the content is what you actually need. So, Duolingo isn't a scam, it's uniquely bad. It does what it's built to do, which is to make language learning accessible, and keep people engaged. If you're completely new to a language and you want something low pressure to get familiar with, then yeah, Duolingo for a few days isn't going to hurt you. The problem is when you treat it as the path. When you assume that if you just keep going, you keep the streak alive, you keep working through lessons, eventually you'll come out on the other side fluent. That's not what the app is designed to produce. And no amount of effort inside a tool built for attention is going to get you to acquisition. The real goal should be 250 words. Then content you actually want to consume. You do the work up front, you get through the part that isn't fun, and then you stop studying and start living inside the language. That's what language learning actually comes down to. And that's the most fun part.